Jack's boots sank slightly into the damp forest floor as he moved quietly among the twisted roots and towering trees. The planet of Viridian 7 was nothing like Earth. The sky shimmered with an orange hue, thick clouds swirled in slow patterns, and the air carried a metallic tang that made his mouth dry. He tightened his grip on the plasma rifle slung across his chest, scanning the shadows for any movement. Reports from the colony ahead had mentioned strange attacks on supply convoys, attacks blamed on a beast native to the forest. Jack, a seasoned human tracker and soldier, had been sent to investigate. Every snap of a twig made him pause. His eyes, trained over years of survival missions, caught the flicker of movement near a thicket. It was fast, almost like a blur, moving between the trees with a grace that suggested both power and intelligence. Jack crouched low, adjusting his sight to focus on the shape. It appeared large, covered in dark fur, or so he thought. His heart beat faster. If the reports were right, this was the creature that had caused so much destruction. "Easy," he whispered to himself. "Just one shot. Take it down before it moves again." He raised his rifle, aiming carefully at the spot where the creature had paused. His finger hovered over the trigger. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, in an instant, he fired. The shot rang through the forest with a sharp hiss. The creature stumbled and fell, landing with a heavy thud that shook loose leaves from the branches above. Jack's chest heaved. He had done it. The threat was gone. He lowered the rifle slightly and approached cautiously, expecting to see a massive, snarling predator. What he saw made him freeze. The figure on the ground was not a beast, not in the way he had imagined. She, or it, was humanoid, small and slender, with delicate features and glowing violet eyes that met his with a mixture of fear and confusion. Her skin shimmered faintly, patterned with lines that seemed almost like markings of light beneath her surface. She lifted a trembling hand toward him and a soft voice escaped her lips. "Why did you hurt me?" Jack stumbled back, the rifle almost slipping from his hands. His mind raced. The reports, the attacks, this was supposed to be a monster. He knelt beside her carefully, dropping the weapon. I thought you were attacking the convoys," he said, his voice rough but quiet. "I didn't know." Her eyes studied him, and there was no anger, only a deep, questioning sadness. She shivered slightly, not from fear but from the injury on her side. Jack's gaze followed, and he saw the small puncture wound smoking slightly from the plasma shot. His stomach sank. "Oh no," he muttered. "I've made a mistake." Gently, he knelt down and pressed his hands on her wound, trying to slow the bleeding. She winced but did not pull away. Jack realized she trusted him despite the pain he had caused. That trust made him feel something heavier than fear. It was guilt, sharp and unyielding. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I thought you were dangerous. I didn't mean to hurt you." The alien, whose movements were elegant even in pain, managed to sit up slightly. She tried to speak but could only manage broken syllables that Jack could not understand. He listened carefully, tilting his head, and then noticed subtle gestures she made with her hands. It was clear she was trying to communicate, but not with words as humans used them. Jack sighed and looked around. The forest was quiet again, almost as if it were watching them. He needed to act fast. The forest was home to other dangers and she was vulnerable. He decided to carry her to a safer place, a clearing he had passed earlier that had softer ground and a small freshwater stream. Carefully, he lifted her, surprised by her light weight. She didn't resist. As he moved through the trees, he kept glancing at her. Her eyes followed him, shimmering in the dim orange light filtering through the canopy. Jack couldn't shake the sense that she was more than she appeared. There was intelligence there, awareness, maybe even emotion, something he had never seen in any predator he had faced before. He reached the clearing after a tense journey. Dropping her gently onto the soft moss, he looked around for any resources that could help him tend to her wound. His supplies were limited, basic medkits, antiseptic and bandages. He worked quickly, cleaning the wound and covering it, keeping his movements careful so as not to cause her more pain. She watched him intently, and after a moment she reached out a hand. This time, her gesture was different. It was not questioning but almost a touch of trust. Jack placed his hand lightly over hers and she let him hold it. The connection was brief but powerful. It was a small bridge between two species that had never met before. "Can you understand me?" he asked softly. Her eyes blinked slowly. Then in a voice that was barely more than a whisper she said, "Yes, little words." Jack's eyebrows lifted. She could speak but not fluently. He nodded. "All right, I'm Jack. I'll help you, don't worry." She nodded slowly, leaning back against the moss, her breathing steadier now. Jack sat a short distance away, scanning the forest while keeping an eye on her. The shadows moved and he noticed strange shapes, small, quick creatures that were not a threat yet but clearly intelligent enough to avoid them. His mind turned to the colony. If they found her, they would kill her, believing her to be a monster. He could not let that happen. As night fell, the forest transformed. The orange sky darkened, and faint bioluminescent plants began to glow, casting surreal colors over the clearing. Leora, as she finally managed to tell him her name, shivered slightly in the cooling air. Jack shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her, noticing how small and fragile she looked in contrast to the wild forest around them. "You're safe for now," he said quietly. "I won't let anyone hurt you." She looked up at him, violet eyes shining with something like hope. For the first time she spoke a few more words haltingly. "Not hurt again." "No," Jack replied. "Not again, I promise." They sat in silence for a long time, broken only by the distant calls of alien wildlife and the rustling of leaves. Jack's mind raced with questions. What was she? Why was she alone? And why had humans assumed she was dangerous? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the colony had made a huge mistake. Fear had painted her as a monster, but in front of him, she was clearly intelligent, gentle, and aware. As the first stars appeared in the sky, he began to understand that this encounter was more than a mission. It was a turning point. Humans had always thought of themselves as the dominant species, the ones who survived through strength and technology. But here was a being who challenged everything he thought he knew about intelligence, strength, and survival. She was fragile, yes, but she carried something far more powerful than claws or teeth. She had trust, awareness, and the quiet strength to survive in a world that feared her. Jack felt a strange bond forming. He knew that helping her would not be easy. There would be danger from both the forest and his own people, but something inside him refused to leave her to fate. He would protect her, even if it meant standing against his own colony. The night deepened, and Jack kept watch, keeping his weapon close but lowered. Leora slept fitfully, her breathing uneven, but she seemed safe. Jack looked at the sky, thinking about the world beyond the forest, the human settlements, and the misunderstanding that had led to this moment. He realized that courage was not just in fighting beasts, but in understanding them, in protecting the innocent even when others saw them as threats. He resolved to learn more about her species, to understand her world, and to find a way for humans and her people to coexist. The forest was vast and full of danger, but Jack felt a strange sense of purpose. This was more than a mission now. It was a chance to do what few humans ever dared, to bridge a gap between species, to see the humanity in another being, even when they were not human. Morning came with a pale light filtering through the misty trees. Leora woke slowly, her violet eyes meeting Jack's once again. She reached out a small hand and he took it gently. "I trust you," she whispered, and Jack nodded, feeling the weight and responsibility of her words. They had survived the night, but the real challenges were just beginning. Jack knew the colony would send hunters, expecting a monster to kill. He had to be ready to protect her, to convince them, or at least to find a way to keep her safe. The forest around them was alive with unknown dangers, but Jack had learned one truth. Survival was not just about strength. It was about courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand for what was right, even against fear and misunderstanding. As they moved together deeper into the forest, Jack glanced at Leora. Her presence was a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories were not over monsters, but over one's own assumptions and fears. And for the first time in his life, he felt that being human meant more than skill or weaponry. It meant the ability to protect, to understand, and to see beyond appearances. The journey ahead was uncertain. There would be threats, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But for now, Jack carried hope. The fragile hope of a bond between two beings from different worlds, and the beginning of a story that could change the way humans saw the universe. Jack and Leora moved carefully through the dense forest, the mist curling around their feet like soft fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and strange flowers, and the occasional rustle of alien wildlife reminded Jack that the forest was alive and full of unseen eyes. Leora walked with him, her steps silent, almost floating over the mossy ground. Despite her frail appearance, there was a quiet strength in her movements. Jack noticed the way she paused to touch plants or examine the strange creatures that scurried past, as if she understood them in a way humans never could. Jack had questions, so many questions, but he knew that rushing her would only frighten her. Instead, he kept a calm presence, speaking softly whenever he could. "We need to find a safe place," he said, scanning the trees. "Somewhere hidden. You can rest there while we figure out what to do next." She nodded, her violet eyes glimmering in the soft light. For a moment, Jack thought he saw a shadow of a smile. She began to speak in broken words, haltingly, trying to form sentences in the human tongue. "Safe place, forest, my home." Jack tilted his head, trying to understand. He realized she was telling him that there was a home nearby, somewhere deep in the forest, a hidden place where her species lived. His mind raced. If he could find this place, maybe he could protect her people. Maybe he could prevent a war before it started. As they walked, Leora pointed out subtle signs in the forest, small markings on trees, scratches in the bark, patterns on the moss. Jack noticed them too, tiny trails that seemed to guide the way, almost like a map only she could read. He realized that the forest was familiar to her in a way it was not to him. She understood the dangers and the safe paths instinctively. Hours passed, and they finally arrived at a clearing. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The clearing was bathed in a soft, natural light that seemed to come from the plants themselves. Trees arched overhead, their leaves glowing faintly in shades of blue and green, forming a protective canopy. A small stream ran through the center, its water crystal clear. Nestled around it were structures made of natural materials, twisted vines, luminous stone, and living plants. The architecture was organic, growing out of the forest rather than built upon it. Jack lowered Leora gently to the ground. She looked around, her eyes shining with recognition and relief. She moved toward the nearest structure, touching the walls as if greeting old friends. Jack followed cautiously, marveling at the harmony of the place. This was not just a home, it was a sanctuary. Suddenly, Leora froze. Her ears twitched and her eyes widened. Jack turned and saw movement at the edge of the clearing, figures emerging from the shadows. They were like Leora but different, taller, more cautious, their eyes glowing softly. They watched him with suspicion, hands raised slightly as a sign of warning. Jack raised his own hands, showing he meant no harm. One of them stepped forward, a female, older and more regal in appearance. She spoke to Leora in a language Jack couldn't understand. Leora responded, gesturing toward him. After a tense moment, the older female's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained cautious. Jack realized he had to prove he was not a threat. I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said slowly. "I was wrong. I thought she was in danger and I made a mistake. Please, I want to help." The elder watched him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. She spoke again to Leora, who turned to Jack. "They allow you stay, but watch you carefully," she said, her voice soft but firm. Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was in unfamiliar territory, among beings who could be easily frightened or angered by his presence. He had to tread carefully. Over the next few days, Jack observed the community. Leora introduced him to their ways, how they gathered food, communicated with the forest, and moved without disturbing the delicate balance of their home. Jack realized that these beings were far more intelligent than humans had assumed. They had knowledge of the ecosystem, subtle control over certain elements, and a deep connection with every living thing around them. Jack also learned more about Leora's people. They had lived in secrecy for centuries, avoiding contact with humans because of past conflicts. Misunderstandings had led to fear and aggression, which in turn had caused humans to see them as dangerous. Jack felt a pang of guilt for contributing to that fear, even unknowingly. Leora and Jack grew closer during this time. They learned to communicate more effectively, combining broken words with gestures and expressions. Jack noticed how her eyes would follow him with curiosity, how she seemed to sense his emotions before he spoke them. There was a gentle intelligence about her, a kind of quiet wisdom that made him rethink everything he knew about the universe. But peace was fragile. Jack knew the colony would not let the situation go unchallenged. Reports of attacks and the missing supply convoys had already reached their leaders. A hunting party would be sent soon, and they would see Leora and her people as threats. He couldn't let that happen. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the forest, Jack and Leora sat near the stream. The air was calm, filled with the soft hum of nocturnal creatures. Jack spoke quietly. "I need to warn them, the humans. They'll come looking, and if they find you, I can't let them hurt you." Leora looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. She nodded, understanding the danger, but she didn't speak. Instead, she touched his hand lightly, as if giving him strength. Jack realized that she trusted him completely, and that trust was a responsibility heavier than any weapon he had carried in his life. The next morning, Jack began preparing. He fashioned signs and signals to communicate with the colony without revealing the exact location of the sanctuary. He wanted to show that Leora's people were not hostile, that they could coexist with humans if given the chance. But he also knew the risk. One wrong move, and they could be attacked before he had a chance to explain. Leora stayed close, assisting in small ways. She showed him how to use the natural environment to conceal their presence, how to read the subtle signs of movement in the forest, and how to sense potential dangers. Jack marveled at her skills. She wasn't weak or helpless. She was powerful in ways humans could not yet understand. As they prepared, a distant sound reached them, a low rumble, mechanical and deliberate. Jack's heart sank. The hunting party had arrived. He could see the glint of human helmets and equipment through the trees, moving with precision toward the clearing. "Stay behind me," Jack whispered to Leora. She obeyed, her small form pressed close to his side. He checked his rifle, but he knew this wasn't a battle he wanted to fight with violence. He had to use his wits, his understanding, and the trust Leora had placed in him. The hunters entered the clearing cautiously, scanning the area. Jack stepped forward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Stop," he called. "She is not dangerous, you have the wrong idea." The humans hesitated, confusion on their faces. One of them shouted, "It's one of the beasts, take it down." Jack shook his head firmly. "No. Look, she's intelligent, she's sentient, you're making a mistake." He motioned to Leora, who stepped forward slowly. The hunters froze. She looked at them with calm violet eyes, then raised her hands in a gesture of peace. Jack held his breath, waiting to see what would happen. For a moment there was silence. Then one of the younger soldiers lowered his weapon slightly, studying her. She's not like the others," he murmured. The elder of the hunting party stepped forward, skeptical and commanding. "We were told there was a threat." We have reports of attacks. We cannot risk our people." Jack took a deep breath. "The reports are wrong. She's not a threat. She has never attacked humans. Her species is peaceful. If you try to fight her, you'll be the aggressor." The commander hesitated, weighing his options. The forest was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Jack glanced at Leora. Her gaze met his, calm but trusting. He realized that this moment could determine the fate of her people. Finally, he spoke with quiet authority. "If you want proof, I'll stay here and show you she means no harm, but do not attack her. Not now, not ever." The commander considered him, then nodded reluctantly. The soldiers lowered their weapons, though wariness remained in their eyes. Jack guided them through a demonstration, how Leora communicated, how she moved, and how she interacted with the forest. Slowly, understanding began to dawn on the humans. By the end of the day, the hunting party had withdrawn, leaving the clearing in peace. Jack and Leora sat together, exhausted but relieved. The forest around them seemed to breathe easier, as if sensing the temporary truce. Jack realized the journey ahead would be difficult. More humans would come, more misunderstandings could occur. But he had seen the power of trust, courage, and compassion, and he knew that if he stood by Leora and her people, humanity could learn something extraordinary, something beyond fear and misunderstanding. As night fell again, Leora rested beside him. Jack looked at the glowing plants, the gentle stream, and the calm forest. He knew that protecting her was not just an act of bravery, it was a test of humanity itself. And he was ready to face it. The morning light filtered softly through the dense canopy as Jack prepared for what he knew would be the most difficult day yet. Leora had slept peacefully beside him, her violet eyes closed, the faint patterns on her skin glowing gently in the dim light. Jack had watched over her through the night, ensuring she was safe, but the distant hum of human machinery reminded him that danger was never far. The colony would not give up easily. They believed the forest was home to a threat, and their fear was powerful. Jack took a deep breath, scanning the forest for signs of movement. Leora stirred and opened her eyes, looking at him with a calm understanding that went beyond words. "We face humans?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "Yes," Jack replied. "They don't know the truth yet, but we'll show them. We'll show them that you're not a monster." She nodded, her trust clear in the tilt of her head. Together, they moved toward the edge of the clearing, careful to stay hidden among the glowing plants and twisted vines. Jack had taught her how to anticipate human movement, how to remain quiet and observant. Leora's natural abilities complemented his training, making them a formidable team despite their differences. As they reached a higher ridge overlooking the path that led into the forest, Jack spotted the column of humans moving carefully below. Soldiers carried rifles and scanning devices, their eyes sharp and alert. At their head was the commander Jack had faced the previous day. He could see the uncertainty in the commander's posture, the doubt that had begun to form in his mind about the creatures they were hunting. Jack knelt beside Leora, whispering instructions. "Follow my lead, stay calm, trust me." She nodded, her hand brushing his briefly before she crouched behind the rocks. Jack checked his rifle not to fire but to signal and protect if needed. His goal was to prevent violence, to bridge understanding, not to fight. The humans advanced slowly, unaware of the hidden sanctuary nearby. Jack raised his hand, signaling Leora. She stepped forward from her hiding spot, her luminous patterns glowing softly, drawing the eyes of the soldiers. There was a moment of silence as all attention focused on her. The forest seemed to hold its breath. One of the younger soldiers whispered, She's glowing, but she's not attacking." Jack stepped forward then, holding his hands high. "Stop, she's not a threat, look at her, she's sentient, she's intelligent, she doesn't want to fight." The commander frowned, scanning the area carefully. "I told you there was a beast. You're saying this creature is not dangerous." "Yes," Jack said firmly. "She has never attacked humans. Her species is peaceful. If you try to harm her, it will be your fault." You will be the aggressor." The commander hesitated. He glanced at the soldiers, then back at Leora, who remained calm, her eyes fixed on Jack. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "Show me," he said, his voice wary but curious. Jack nodded and guided Leora through a series of simple actions, gestures of peace, interactions with the forest, and ways she could communicate without fear. The soldiers watched closely, some in disbelief. They had been trained to expect danger, to react swiftly to threats. But what they saw now did not fit their training. It challenged their understanding. Leora moved to the small stream, cupped her hands, and brought water to the plants nearby. The plants responded subtly, their glow intensifying. A bird-like creature perched nearby, chirping softly as if acknowledging her presence. Jack explained to the humans that her species had a connection with the environment, a way of interacting with the ecosystem that humans had never seen. The commander's eyes narrowed, skepticism fighting with curiosity. How do we know she won't turn on us?" he asked. Jack met his gaze steadily. "Because she has no reason to. She trusts me and I trust her. And if you open your eyes, you can see the truth too. You can choose to understand rather than destroy." For a long moment, silence hung over the forest. Then one soldier stepped forward, slowly lowering his rifle. I think I understand," he murmured. The commander studied Leora for a moment longer, then gave a slow nod. "Enough," he said. "We leave, but keep watch. We will report back and the colony will decide the next steps." Jack exhaled in relief. Leora looked at him, her violet eyes filled with quiet gratitude. She spoke, her broken words carefully formed. "You saved me, saved us." Jack smiled softly, brushing a strand of her hair back from her face. "No," he said. "You saved me too. You reminded me what it means to be human: courage, trust, compassion. That's what matters most." The humans retreated, their machines fading into the distance. Jack and Leora returned to the clearing, where the elder female and others of her kind watched them silently. The elder stepped forward, her eyes assessing Jack. Finally, she spoke in her soft, melodic language, which Leora translated. "You have risked much for us. You have shown courage beyond your kind. You are welcome here." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. This was more than a victory for Leora's species. It was a small triumph for humanity as well, a reminder that understanding and empathy could triumph over fear. Over the following days, Jack worked with Leora and her people to strengthen their sanctuary and communication. He taught them how to anticipate human patrols, while they taught him subtle ways to move through the forest, how to sense danger, and even how to heal minor injuries using natural remedies. Jack was amazed at their knowledge, their intelligence, and their harmony with the planet. He realized that humans had much to learn from beings like Leora, if only they were willing to see beyond fear. Leora and Jack grew closer, their bond deepening through trust and shared experiences. They communicated more easily now, using a mix of gestures, telepathic hints, and slowly expanding vocabulary. Jack marveled at how patient and thoughtful she was, how she seemed to understand his emotions without words. He had faced countless dangers in his life, but nothing had tested him as much as the responsibility of protecting Leora and her people. The colony eventually sent a delegation of scientists and diplomats, curious to learn about the beings they had feared. Jack guided them to the edge of the sanctuary, carefully explaining the situation without exposing the entire community. The scientists were astonished by what they saw: an intelligent, peaceful species that lived in harmony with their environment, capable of subtle manipulation of the ecosystem in ways humans could not yet comprehend. Reports returned to the colony, and after tense deliberations, a decision was made. The hunting orders were revoked. Leora's people would remain free, protected by a new understanding established between the humans and the forest dwellers. Jack felt a quiet pride in the role he had played. It had not been weapons or brute force that achieved this outcome, but courage, empathy, and the willingness to see beyond fear. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the forest, Jack and Leora sat together near the stream. The glow of the plants cast a soft light over their faces. Jack reflected on how much had changed in just a few days, the fear, the misunderstandings, the near loss of life. And now there was hope. "You taught humans?" Leora asked, her voice gentle. "I tried," Jack replied, smiling. "They will need time, but I think they can learn. They saw you and they realized you're not a monster. That's the first step." Leora's eyes sparkled. She reached out, touching his hand lightly. "You brave human," she said. "Courage strong like your heart." Jack felt warmth in his chest. "No," he said quietly. "You were brave too. You trusted me when you could have been afraid. That's strength too." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the forest. The sounds of wildlife, the gentle flow of water, and the rustling of leaves reminded Jack that life, in all its forms, was interconnected. Humans had often believed that strength meant domination, but here, in the quiet forest with Leora and her people, he understood a deeper meaning. Strength was in understanding, in protecting the innocent, and in having the courage to act rightly even when others feared the unknown. Over time, Jack became a bridge between the two species. He returned to the colony occasionally, reporting on the forest dwellers and ensuring that humans respected their space. Leora's people flourished, their sanctuary untouched, and they began to share their knowledge cautiously with the humans, forming a tentative but growing partnership. Jack and Leora continued to explore the forest together, learning from each other. He marveled at her intelligence, her connection with nature, and the quiet dignity of her people. She learned from him, too, about human ingenuity, persistence, and the value of trust between individuals of different species. Their friendship became a symbol of hope, showing that cooperation could overcome fear, and that humanity was capable of greatness when it chose compassion over aggression. As the sun set over Viridian 7, Jack and Leora stood together at the edge of the sanctuary. The forest stretched endlessly before them, full of mystery and life. Jack looked at her and she met his gaze, her violet eyes filled with quiet understanding. "Future bright?" she asked, her words simple but meaningful. "Yes," Jack replied. "Because now we know we can do better. We can protect life, even when it's different from our own. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us strong." Leora smiled faintly, and Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The forest was safe, her people were free, and humanity had a chance to learn from the mistakes of fear. Together, they had changed the course of events, not with violence but with courage, understanding, and compassion. The stars shimmered above, and the forest pulsed with life. Jack realized that this was only the beginning of human understanding, of the bond between species, and of the possibilities that lay ahead when fear was replaced with trust. And in that quiet, glowing forest with Leora by his side, he understood the truest meaning of heroism: to protect, to learn, and to bridge worlds that had never met before.